The piano that plays by itself, a gift from the past. It started with a piano, an old black grand piano gifted to me by my grandmother after she passed away. She had always loved music. Every Sunday she would sit at the piano and play soft, haunting melodies. But after she died, the piano sat in her house, untouched, until my parents decided to bring it home. It was beautiful, but something about it felt wrong. The first night I woke up to a sound. A single note. Faint but clear. I sat up, heart pounding. The house was silent. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe a dream. But then, the note played again. A low, trembling key vibrating through the air. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. The piano sat in the living room, still and untouched, but when I stepped closer, a key pressed down, by itself. I ran back to my room and locked the door. The melodies in the dark. For the next few nights, the piano stayed silent. I almost convinced myself that I had imagined it, but then it started playing full songs, always at 3 a.m. Soft, sorrowful melodies drifting through the house. My parents never heard it, only me, and every night the music got louder. The shadow at the piano. One night, I decided to catch whatever was happening. I set up my phone to record. I placed it on the bookshelf, aimed at the piano, and went to bed. When I checked the footage the next morning, my hands were shaking. At exactly 3 a.m., the piano played by itself, keys moving, no hands, no person. And then, a shadow rose from the bench. It wasn't solid, just a dark, shifting mass. But it had a face, a twisted, hollow face, staring at the camera. Before the video cut to static, who was playing? I showed my parents. They laughed, said it was an old piano, that the strings were just settling. But I knew better. I dug through my grandmother's old things, looking for answers, and that's when I found it. A newspaper clipping from 1952. Young pianist found dead after recital, mysterious tragedy at local theater. A photo of the girl, sitting at a piano, her hands frozen on the keys. Her face was pale, her eyes wide open, and in the background was my piano, the last song. That night I sat at the piano. I placed my hands on the keys and whispered, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, the piano played, soft, gentle, a sad, lonely song. And behind me, I heard breathing. Cold fingers brushed against my shoulder. A whisper, "Let me finish my song." I ran, and I never touched the piano again. The final rest. The next morning, my parents found the piano broken. Strings snapped, keys shattered, and inside a single old, yellowed sheet of music. Its title, The Final Lullaby. No composer, no date, just a song that was never finished, until now. Now the piano is silent, and at night, I finally sleep in peace. The crying baby in the empty house. The first time I heard it, I moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. It was a quiet street, peaceful, friendly, the kind of place where people waved as they walked their dogs. But there was one house that stood out. An abandoned house. Old, gray, and falling apart. It sat at the end of the street. The windows were covered in grime, the front yard overgrown with weeds, and at night, I could hear a baby crying inside. No one lives there. At first, I thought it was a trick of the wind, or maybe someone had moved in. But when I asked my neighbors, their faces darkened. "That house has been empty for years," Mrs. Porter, the old woman next door, whispered. "The last owners left in a hurry. Said they heard things at night. Said they heard the baby." I laughed it off, but that night I heard it again. A faint, high-pitched wail coming from the house. It sounded sad. It sounded real. The dare curiosity got the better of me. One night, I grabbed a flashlight and walked up to the old house. The front door was unlocked. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of dust and something rotten. I stepped inside. The crying stopped. Silence pressed around me. Then, a creak from upstairs. I wasn't alone. The nursery that shouldn't exist. The sound had come from the second floor. I climbed the rotting staircase, my heart pounding. At the end of the hall, a single door stood slightly open. Inside, a nursery. Old-fashioned wallpaper peeled from the walls. A wooden crib sat in the middle of the room, and inside the crib, nothing. But the blanket was moving, as if something invisible was underneath. I took a step closer, and the blanket collapsed, like whatever had been there, vanished. The shadow in the window, I ran out of the house. As I reached the street, I turned back, and in the upstairs window, I saw a figure. A woman, dressed in white, her face hidden in shadow, and in her arms, she was holding something. Something small, something that kept crying. The missing baby. The next day, I searched the town archives. I found an old newspaper article. Local woman found dead in abandoned home, baby missing. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She lived in the house 50 years ago. Her baby Thomas went missing one night. The police never found him. Margaret went mad with grief. She locked herself in the house, whispering, "He's still here. I can hear him crying." A week later, she was found dead in the nursery. The crying never stops. That night, I heard the baby again, louder, closer. And when I looked out my window, the woman in white stood in my yard, her head tilted, her arms empty. She was looking for her baby. And I knew she thought I had him. I left the next morning. I never went back. But sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear the crying. The hand that reached out from under my bed the night it started. I never used to be afraid of the dark. Even as a kid, when most children needed nightlights, I slept just fine in pitch-black rooms. Ghost stories didn't scare me. Monsters under the bed? Just silly tales meant to frighten kids into behaving. At least that's what I thought, until that night. It was late, past 3 a.m., when I woke up. My room was dark, but not completely. A dull orange glow seeped through my window from the street lamp outside. The only sound was the faint hum of my ceiling fan, rotating lazily above me. And then, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic scratching sound. Faint, like nails dragging across wood. I frowned, still groggy, trying to place the noise. My heart was slow, my mind foggy. Maybe it was a tree branch against the window? Then I remembered. There were no trees outside my window. The scratching wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from under my bed. The first touch. A chill crawled up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. Probably the house settling, or maybe a rat. But deep down, I knew better. I held my breath, listening. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then, the sound stopped. A dead, suffocating silence filled the room. I exhaled, relieved. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it really was just my half-asleep brain playing tricks on me. I shifted slightly, pulling my blanket up, and that's when I felt it. Something cold wrapped around my ankle. Thin, bony fingers. A hand. The whisper in the dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. The fingers weren't tight, but they were there, lightly curled around my ankle, as if testing me, feeling my warmth. The skin was icy, like it had been buried underground for years. Then slowly, it pulled. A gentle tug, then harder, like it wanted me to come under the bed. My breath caught in my throat. My mind was screaming at me to react, to kick, to run, to do something, but I was paralyzed. Then from under the bed came a whisper. "Come play with me." A child's voice. Small, innocent, but wrong. A glimpse of the unseen. That whisper broke the spell. I yanked my foot away, scrambling to sit up, my heart hammering in my chest. My breathing was erratic, sharp and ragged. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, fumbling with the flashlight. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to turn it on. When I finally did, I hesitated. Did I really want to look? I swallowed hard and pointed the beam toward the floor. The space beneath my bed was empty, but the dust, the thin layer of dust that had settled beneath my bed for months, was disturbed. And there, etched into the wooden floor, were deep scratch marks, like something had been trying to crawl out. The next night, I didn't sleep after that. I sat on my bed, knees drawn to my chest, waiting for the sun to rise. Every shadow seemed darker, every creak of the house more sinister. By morning, I had convinced myself it was a dream, a hallucination from sleep paralysis. That had to be it, but I wasn't taking any chances. That afternoon, I stuffed old books, shoeboxes, and anything I could find under my bed. If there was something down there, it wouldn't have room to move. That night, I forced myself to sleep early. I left my phone's flashlight on, pointing toward the floor. A small comfort. Hours passed. Silence. Then, 3:12 a.m. I woke up to the feeling of pressure against my mattress, like something was pressing up from underneath. I bolted upright, grabbing my phone. The light was off. I know I left it on. And then, knock, knock, knock from under the bed. The face in the darkness, I stopped breathing. The knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Then, a whisper. "Why won't you play with me?" I choked on my breath, gripping my blanket like it could protect me. The voice was closer this time, like whatever was under my bed was crawling up, pressing its face against the mattress. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. Then, a shadow moved on the wall. Not mine. Something small and frail, with 2 long arms and twisted fingers. It stretched up from the space below my bed, reaching toward me. I snapped. I leapt off the bed and sprinted out of my room, late crashing into the hallway, panting, heart racing. I didn't go back in until morning. The final encounter. The next day I convinced myself it was stress, lack of sleep, anxiety. But that night I still slept in the living room. And I would have stayed there. But my mom noticed. She insisted I was being ridiculous, that there was nothing under my bed. She made me go back. I didn't argue. But before I got in, I checked. Using my phone light, I slowly crouched down, heart hammering. At first, I saw nothing, just the old books and shoeboxes crammed under there. Then, something moved. A face. Small, sunken. Its skin stretched too tightly over its skull. Its eyes were black voids. It smiled. And then, a hand shot out. I screamed. And this time, my mom heard it. The aftermath. I don't sleep in that room anymore. My mom, shaken, let me move into the guest bedroom. She never admitted she saw it, but she never made me go back either. We sealed the door shut. But some nights, even from across the house, I still hear it, the scratching and the whisper. "Come play with me."